All right. It is 6:04. I am calling to order the December 19th, 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Can we call to a roll, please?
Yes. Christopher Toth. Here. Ishmael Harris.
Here.
Keith Alborn.
Here.
Gary Moss. Here. Jeffrey Estes.
Here.
Patrice Parsons. Here. Joshua Bingaman is not here. Jordan Scott.
Here.
David Barrow. Here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, on to citizen comments. This is just for those who don't know, this is a continuation from the November 21st P&Z meeting that we had. I do have, for any citizens that are listening or anyone plans to pass the word, we did keep the comments from the last time. I was hoping people would show up for them, but they did not, but we have them here. Do we have any other citizen comments?
No, not at this time.
Okay. All right. On to item 3A, consider action to approve meeting minutes from the November 21st, 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
I'd like to make a motion.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
You know what my motion is.
Commissioner Moss and Commissioner Barrow got the second.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Call for roll, please.
Yes. Christopher Toth.
Here.
Ishmael Harris.
Yes.
Keith Alborn.
Yes.
Gary Moss.
Yes.
Jeffrey Estes.
Yes.
Patrice Parsons.
Don't I have to abstain since I wasn't here?
You can.
Abstain.
Yeah. Jordan Scott.
Yes.
David Barrow. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. On to item 3B, consider action on a commercial replat of the reserve tract of the Lone Star Storage subdivision to be called Sindbro, being 49.78 acres located at the northeast corner of State Highway 71 and Farm to Market Road 969 within the city limits of Bastrop, Texas.
Good afternoon, Commission. Kennedy went home sick today, so I apologize. You get me. This is a commercial replat of the property previously known as Pearl River, now being called Sendero. It's at the intersection of Highway 71 and FM 969. This is the location of the entire parcel as it stands. The replat takes into account what was previously a reserve lot. I do have Josh Campbell with EHRD and Eric Mayfield with Pearl River here to discuss the replat. So I will give you gentlemen an opportunity to give your presentation. What's important for the commission to understand is plats are ministerial in process, meaning if it meets all of the check marks of the local government code, the planning commission must approve it. Sendero is a little bit different because we have multiple layers of agencies who need to review. The city, who used to have a very linear review process, we have consolidated our review to concurrent review. There are still some things pending, most namely the TxDOT approval of the project. We have preliminary information from TxDOT. I do have an email from TxDOT with some considerations. And so in order to move the plat forward, in order to give the commission an ability to act, the city council entered into a memorandum of understanding with the development that says, we understand these are the things you need. We will not move to plat recordation until these things are in process. The reason for that is there's a banking financing mechanism. There are particular steps that keep the development in process, and to bring it to a stop, and TxDOT takes sometimes months to get approvals, it would bring the development to a halt. And there are several letters of intent that have already been signed with the development process. So the MOU, I believe, is included in your packet, and it talks about final recordation. Why is that important for our new guys? It's important because you cannot get a building permit without a recorded plat. And so any means to go vertical would be shut down. For reference, we entered into a memorandum of understanding with the school site over in Old Town. I believe it was the Mina school site. That had a pretty hot mess of plats that had massive history to them, and it was difficult for the school district to get their things in order by the time they needed to go vertical to meet their bond covenants. We entered into a memorandum. They were allowed to go vertical. We've resolved the plat, I believe, or in process of resolving the plat, and it was ownership issues. So this is not an unusual circumstance. It is the development sequence that sometimes gets a little skewy. So I'll let the developers reps discuss any.
Sure. Good evening, Eric Mayfield. I'm with Pearl River. I'm the development partner there. I'll just give you some quick general overview, and then we've got our civil engineer here that'll probably answer any technical questions you may have. But what we're trying to do is really get a lot of development process done in parallel, and the city's been tremendously helpful in our permitting process. In the same with TxDOT, but to get a full final formal approval from them could be another 2 to 4 months, depending on how that goes. And we've got a tremendous amount of pre-leasing already done on the perimeter sites along 71, and also the interior. That we're going to develop 2 16,000 square foot inline retail buildings along 71. We've got leasing with those tenants as well. So if this process were to delay further, then those opportunities would be at risk. And what we've been able to do with TxDOT is in the city is confirm that the curb cuts along 71 access are not going to move. Therefore, our internal roads won't move, kind of addressing that risk. And what we're looking to do with the whole permit process is put the majority of these roads in, put the inline retail in, and then turn over to the pad site tenants to start their restaurant build-outs process. And so that our schedule has us starting in mid-January for that, and the city's been really helpful in aligning different parallel processes that we've been talking about to get us the permits that were needed, and then the plat's part of that. But unless y'all have questions, then I'll turn over to our civil engineer.
All right, a quick question. Do you know who's coming in at this point? You mentioned restaurants and businesses. Do you know who's committed?
We do. We know we're not gone public with that with a lot of them just yet, and we're organizing press releases and things for the spring. But there's a number of high-quality restaurants that you'll recognize in other markets. Some from Houston, some are national restaurant chains. So right now we've got 2 full-service high-quality restaurants that we have executed deals with. We've got a franchise coffee drive-through operation on that kind of far east portion, and then we've got a national another national restaurant group we're negotiating with, and then that final piece on 969 and 71 is still under negotiation there. Within the retail, we've got a mix of different tenants right now and a mix of different negotiating statuses. We've got a few executed leases. We've got a sandwich group, kind of a breakfast type group, and then a health and beauty type use. And then we're talking about some other medical type uses and some other restaurants. It's probably about as specific as we want to, get at this point, if that's okay with y'all.
Commissioner Toth. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Medical facilities, are you talking about just offices at this point?
Well, right now we're just talking about 2 inline 16,000 square foot tilt wall buildings. So think a neighborhood, center or neighborhood kind of strip. And so we're talking about a little bit more lifestyle, think about kind of facial, nails, things like that in right now in those tenants. We may have more later in other phases, but that's the kind of use we're thinking right now that wants to be a little more kind of, street facing, where some of the other more destination, medical in terms of regular general practices and that sort of thing might want to be a little bit more interior to the project, therefore have a little bit more favorable leasing rates.
Okay. When do you think you'll have the list completed?
Oh, real soon. Yeah, real soon. We're working on the press releases and all that. Our thought is we want to have a groundbreaking event in early spring Want to be able to have a groundbreaking, and then we would have the event probably before spring break, while the weather's nice, but, before people bug out for spring break, and that'll be our kind of first full kind of press release with tenants named and that sort of thing at that time.
So would you say for the most part, this property is mixed use, correct? Like the back half
Yeah,
has the
in
apartments and
concept,
lives
it's intended to be mixed use for sure. Now, realize too, this is outside of our scope for tonight, but we already had sold 25 acres to the north to Wood
Yeah.
Partners, and they've completed about half of their 700 planned multifamily units. So
Okay.
that's kind of use number one. Retail use number two.
Yeah, of course.
We'd like to do some service, some medical wellness type use as well. And then in orientation, we're trying to create central sidewalks and landscaping amenities to make it a little bit more lifestyle
Yeah, that was going to be
focused.
my second question, because I know a lot of people are probably pretty upset about the whole tree thing. Do y'all have any plans to be providing those trees or any green space back to the community?
Yeah,
Or is this going to be
there's-
another concrete jungle type development?
Well, absolutely not a concrete jungle. What we're trying to do in concept is somewhere between an urban mixed-use, highly amenitized project and a lifestyle suburban kind of big box concept. So to come in between where we're creating deliberately more walkable spaces, more green spaces, more lifestyle components to make it more strollable, for example. But we may still have some larger, bigger box type tenants because it's a big site. Now, there's multiple kind of ways that we'll do that. Some of it's with design, some of it's with landscape design. We'll have internal sidewalks that are amenitized in addition to the roads and that sort of thing, and multiple green spaces within the property. Second, where we can, everything will be, it's a really nice landscaping package and much more upgraded than the concrete spall that you talked about.
Of course.
And then where we can, we're going to upgrade some trees, so it's not just Charlie Brown tree, coming
Yeah,
in with your
yeah.
initial, development. And then the third point is we deliberately have some improvements planned around the detention, which is kind of this L-shaped configuration above the storage facility, kind of terminating in Duff Road, if you're familiar with it. And the idea is create some trails adjacent to that, some public park type amenities, but at the same time, we want to tie those into the overall project. So somebody's in the apartments, they can go run there, for example, or somebody comes to the park, then they can stroll along some of the internal, sidewalks and then at least become familiar with what we're trying to do with Sendero, and then maybe come back the next time for a longer kind of multi-use type visit. So I think there's multiple facets of our landscape plan overall design that we hope will address those concerns.
Okay, and I guess,
Commissioner Toth has been waiting for a while.
Thank you. I'm sorry, it's unclear to me, is there going to be access from 71 or into the development?
Yeah, so the access points will be, they're on the service road, and I don't know if I know how to use your pointer.
Those are
here.
the access points.
Oops.
Okay. I got it. Okay. Gary was very helpful and pointed them out
I
to
think
me.
Go back. There you go.
Okay, there you go. I better not touch the
And
device.
just a comment, I was going to ask about the green spaces too. I'm one of the people who was very upset about what happened with all the trees. And as a matter of fact, the tree ordinance we're working on, we're trying to make sure that never happens again. So I would encourage you to maximize your green spaces and make it a place that people who live here can be proud of.
Yes, sir, and we absolutely intend to do that, and we've worked on a number of projects in Houston before that are definitely, that are community centers by nature, and that have more green space than you would typically have, that is a deliberate part of the process. And there's a project that you may or may not know, it's called City Center in Houston. That's one of the ones that Spencer Harkness and I worked together at Midway when we were before Pearl River. And one of the things that we did there was we deliberately came out of the ground with more mature trees, and it was, the entirety of that project was not, what makes it special, and no offense, was not code. It was bringing together best practices that were above code requirements. And I would fully anticipate us to do that here. And this is intended to be a long-term legacy type project, not a quick fix, quick flip type development. So we think you're going to be very proud of it at the end of the day. We will be, and we hope that y'all will be.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
City manager's just going to pull up an image for us.
This is the view. So there is a incentive that the city has granted for $6 million completing this particular road, and it's not an incentive that's received until they create the benefits. Here's the medical wellness and also a hotel site, retail bounded through here, and they'll release those as necessary. And then there's some other sort of wellness sites that are identified in this area. Most of this area in the middle is green space. I'm going to pull up an image that shows an image as if you were standing on 969 facing where the hotel is driven. So when he talks about a courtyard and he talks about green space, that's that center, that's that entire center portion.
And that's kind of our phase 2 that we're developing. We're in pre-development of right now. But phase 1, just the inline retail buildings, we think are going to create an interesting, distinctive experience for folks. But that's very much in line with what we plan to do.
Question for you, Sylvia. The memorandum of understanding that y'all entered into with these guys, can you just give us a summary of that so we can? 'Cause there's
Yes.
really not much for us to do, just say you've done it.
Correct. The final drainage plan, the public improvement plan, TxDOT's approval, those are the three major items. And of course, they're both the drainage and the public improvement plan obviously are contingent on TxDOT. That's why we can't. We know that TxDOT has approved the driveway access. We also know that TxDOT wants a decel lane. We also know that TxDOT wants some additional right-of-way. So some of that movement doesn't come into fruition until we actually get into the site plan. You wouldn't have seen it on the plat anyway, but to give me the warm and fuzzy that we're going to comply with everything that TxDOT wants, they know they're not going to record the plat.
So you're dotting all the i's and crossing all the t's.
Yes, yes.
Let's move forward.
Anyone else have anything?
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Parking? You had illustrations on parking slots, spaces, how many you're allowing per store or office space?
We didn't come prepared to discuss that today. In concept, we are within code. And also, the concept is that we would provide parking as part of a mixed-use concept. And what we discovered is, over time, that the different uses have a heavier parking requirement at different times. And so that there's kind of a co-use type thinking with the parking. And we want to provide adequate parking. Of course, for customers, we want them to be able to come to all the restaurants and retailers and have for everybody to be successful. At the same time, we don't want just a giant paved lot with an overabundance of parking. And so that goes into our development process. But if we need to, we can try to pull some plans at some point, but I didn't bring those with me tonight.
McCoy's is Best Buy.
Well, right now, everything's single story. There's some thoughts about, the hotel won't be single story. That's, I think, 4 stories, limited service type hotel, but quality brands. And there's the kind of north of the hotel, kind of along what'll be Moat Way, is our wellness building. That we're toying with, that could be 2-story, 1-story, 2 stories. It kind of depends on how our pre-leasing goes and what kind of the how the market favors that building. But most everything will be single story.
Sylvia, what do you recommend? How do we do this?
We recommend approval of the plat conditioned on the memorandum of understanding that's been approved by council.
So that's what we're looking at.
And for
I think he wants to make a motion.
for the public's benefit and the commission's benefit, This road, which I believe is Boat Way, this is the only public road within the development. So, we had a lot of conversation about B3. We had a lot of conversation about grid systems.
Is that going to be Sylvia Way?
I wish. There was actually there was a road in Corpus Christi, but anyway, that's a different
Who's
story.
counting?
Yeah. This is the only public road. And again, I just want to make sure that folks understand none of these interior roads that really are only specific to the development are going to be on the taxpayer dime. It does not make any sense to me, regardless of what the B3 code says in terms of a grid system, for a potential tenant to say, I don't have business coming my way because the city hasn't maintained the road. The city hasn't. And for those of you who don't know, right in front of the Walmart, Agnes is actually named, and it cuts across right in front of the Walmart. I don't want to be responsible for any of that upkeep. This road, however, does provide relief from 969. And if you recall, across the street from 969 at the intersection, there is Vista Puente that we'll be pushing through. So all of these, as part of a transportation plan, are intended to give relief to 969, as well as Blakey. And Blakey will be in front of council on the 17th.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion, and do we have a second?
Does he have to use the correct verbiage?
Yes. Go ahead and use the verbiage, please.
Is it your proposal to pass contingent on the memorandum?
It is a memorandum. They've already entered into it.
Okay.
The city has.
What's your
We're just
motion?
What is your motion?
What's your motion?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
The motion is
Accept it.
approval of the plat contingent on the MOU approved by council.
What'd she say?
You have to say it.
Yeah, please
Try it.
repeat it.
Give it a
for
go.
For the record, please, Mr. Moss, Commissioner Moss.
To accept the memorandum as written that y'all have entered into, so we can pass this on to city council.
How about, I propose that we pass the plat, approve the plat based upon the memorandum.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Does that work for the motion? Okay. All right, can you call for roll, please?
Yes. Christopher Toth,
Yes.
Ishmael Harris,
Yes.
Keith Alborn,
Yes.
Gary Moss,
Yes.
Jeffrey Estes,
Yes.
Patrice Parsons,
Yes.
Jordan Scott,
Yes.
and David Barrow. Thank you.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to make this a little bit easy for myself as we move through these next items. So on to item 3C, I'm going to open up a public hearing to consider and act on amending section 6.3.007, cross-access connections, to allow no cross-access where a hardship or inappropriate traffic flow would exist. Does that work for me opening the meeting? The public hearing?
Yes, that's
Sorry,
perfectly
the public
fine.
hearing.
We'll just need to remember to close
I
it.
will close it. I'll remember. Gotcha. Ms. City Manager.
Thank you, Commission. So this really is verbiage cleanup in the code. There are cross-access connections that are required, and I'll show you a picture here. This is the Chick-fil-A. So there's a cross-access easement that happens between the Chick-fil-A and the bank. If you've been through the Chick-fil-A drive-through and you try to get across the bank, you might hit a pedestrian. You may hit a pedestrian. There is so much cross-access traffic that comes along here, and its intent was to keep off of 71. We always want minimal driveway accesses because of stacking. You see in the Chick-fil-A, it'll get stacked up, and our police department can tell you the number of times we go out there because of rear-end accidents. So the intent of the code is to give staff the ability to say, if it can't be met, then staff has the ability, the DRC has the ability to waive the connection requirement and perhaps require it in a different location. It is already mentioned in other sections of the code. This is just code cleanup. Mm-hmm.
What are you proposing we do? The whole problem between Chick-fil-A and the bank. What are you proposing?
So if another development came like this with a high use, like Chick-fil-A, it would give staff the ability to say, you know what, that cross-access doesn't work there. Mhm.
All right. Yeah. Do we have any discussion? No? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing. Oh, sorry. Comments, sorry. Do we have it? We don't have any comments. Do we have any citizen comments on that? No?
No.
All right. She gave me everything. Yeah, she gave me everything. We have some on the other ones, but not on this one. Okay, so I can go ahead and close it now? All right, I'm going to close it. All right, we need to make a motion, please.
I make a motion, we recommend the amendments as proposed by staff.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Did you copy who that was? All right. Can you call for roll, please?
Yes. Christopher Toth.
Yes.
Ishmael Harris.
Yes.
Keith Alborn.
Yes.
Gary Moss.
Yes.
Jeffrey Estes.
Yes.
Patrice Parsons.
Yes.
Jordan Scott.
Yes.
David Barrow.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes unanimous. All right, I'm going to open up a public hearing for item 3D. Hold a public hearing to consider and act on section SEC 6.5.00 building standards per place type A, lot occupation table by adding additional dwelling units category. Those are the ADUs. And to modify the number of ADUs allowed by right shall be 1, and 2 ADUs shall be allowed subject to meeting section 6.3.006 parking as amended in section 6.5.003A lot occupation standards unless authorized by the Development Review Committee and or the Planning Commission in section 6.3.008 lot occupation. This amendment seeks to allow 1 ADU by right and administratively allow 2 if the on-site parking and drainage requirements can be met. Additionally, water, sewer, and other infrastructure considerations must also be met. The city manager?
So, Commission, thank you. We talked about the relationships of parking, flooding, any additional dwelling units which equal impervious cover unless it's being built upon something that's already there, i.e. the garage. And then we're going to talk about trees and native vegetation, not at this meeting, but at the next meeting. So that big presentation is because additional dwelling units were not included in the table. They were included in the text. So, part 1 is to add it to the table so that we understand what we're working with. Tables and illustrations are always easier for staff and the general public to get through the development code process. So currently in P2, P3, and P4, additional dwelling units are 2 allowed by right. When you don't have a lot size minimum, that's when we begin to face serious issues. So this item is really intricately tied to the impervious cover discussion we're going to have at later slides. The proposal is to have 1 additional dwelling unit allowed by right, and 2 if certain conditions can be met. At the last meeting, you guys recommended that 1 parking space per additional dwelling unit. So it's 2 parking spaces for a single family and then 1 for the additional dwelling unit. So a total of 3 parking spaces. For context.
Can I ask you a question real quick while you're right
Yes.
there? Didn't the city council go with 1 per room the other night?
Yes, it ended up with a single family home would end up with 2, potentially 3 if you're going up. But no, they ended up with a 2-car garage equals 4 parking spaces.
Right. But it's 1 parking spot
refresh
per
my memory.
bedroom?
I
Is
don't
that what
know
that
if
was?
we addressed the actual ADUs, but okay.
I have a council member in the audience yelling yes. 1 per bedroom. So a 3-bedroom house is 3 parking spaces. So a 2-car garage and the landing of the driveway into the garage equals 4 parking spaces.
And the ADU would be 1 more? Or
Yes, 1 more.
does it
So if
take
you
it
had
up
a
on the
3-bedroom
floor there?
house, in X area, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, for example, you had a 2-car garage in the front with a parking pad, you could add 1 additional ADU and still be within the parking requirements based on the garage and the parking pad.
Okay.
Sorry, thanks for refreshing my memory. A lot's happened. So you've heard the arguments, right? You're taking away my property rights. You know, we already have a lot of Airbnbs. Do more really matter? And don't you want more Airbnbs to pay into the hot fund? Don't we want more hot taxes? Or I need the ADU to help offset my mortgage. What if I have two sets of parents and this just doesn't seem fair? These are just general arguments that we've heard throughout the process. So, you know, additional dwelling units invite sometimes investors, and Airbnb removes valuable housing stock. That's not always the case. That's just been what we have considered. We do have a community meeting in January. I know it's been about 7 months since we had the last discussion. We will have a community meeting to talk about short-term rentals. Commissioner Moss recommended a carrot and not a stick process, meaning if you're a registered Airbnb or similar short-term rental, then we help market, we help incentivize by showing you on all of our Visit Bastrop other areas. And that's a good idea. The additional ADU, that's what you can consider unless the impervious, not to consider an additional ADU unless there are impervious covers, the necessary infrastructure and the parking. So it would be an application to the DRC for review and an administrative variance. You wouldn't have to see it here. There is always a process for an appeal to you and to City Council should staff say no and give reasons why. Or you can leave the code as is, allowing 2 additional dwelling units.
Anyone have anything to talk about? No? Yes, I do. So we do have citizen comments. We have Pablo Serna, which is to speak on item 3D. Please state your name and location, please. Thank you. It's a little hard. There we go.
Okay. All right, let's start all over. Okay, Pablo Serna, 1104 Hill Street. Okay, so thank you for listening. I would recommend or have you consider that we move towards a net density per acre when it comes to dwelling units, primary dwelling units and accessory dwelling units. The reason being is a lot of people move to Bastrop and they like kind of the density that's there. In some places it's higher, in other places it isn't. And I know in the P3 that it indicates in the code that it's supposed to be some of the lowest density around, and with no minimum lot sizes, it can get pretty dense if you chop it up pretty quickly and stick some small, tiny houses on there. And if each of those lots can have an accessory dwelling unit, you're doubling that. So they can study that. I think the staff can look at that and look around. I would think that it's going to come somewhere between 6 and 8 per acre. And you should probably consider primary dwelling units and accessory dwelling units as being that density factor, because you can put a lot of people in an acre. And so how you do that is kind of where it gets, I think important. I think you should look at the difference between a large lot and a small lot. There's going to be some large lots right now. I live next to a full acre lot. That individual has not subdivided their land, and if they can do it at a very tiny area, that could be not such a good thing. I think people looking at density at a greater scale than just per lot is a recommendation. Back to the point about parking, I highly recommend that you do what a lot of municipalities do, which is do it per dwelling unit. So it's so much parking per dwelling unit. So a 2 parking per primary dwelling unit and like 1 per accessory dwelling unit is usually what you see. It's hard to define what a bedroom is, and some people I know have gotten really creative with not calling something a bedroom, but it's really being a bedroom. So I think if you just call it a bedroom, people are going to not show that on their plans and not call that a bedroom and say that's a flex room or that's an exercise room or that's an office. So I think If you do it per primary dwelling unit, that kind of gets to it right away. And if you add an accessory dwelling unit and you can do that, then you have one more. So I do think looking at the whole net density per acre is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, no one has anything to say? No other citizen comments on that? So,
Question for you,
I
Sylvia.
would like to say for the record, Mr. Cerna and I agree. We met about this yesterday. And he brings, Colin, if you could, on BCAD, bring up Mr. Cerna's address, 1107 Hill, 1104, sorry, Hill.
Well,
And just to give you a visual.
doesn't us reducing the impervious cover, that kind of takes that into account that he was discussing there?
Yes and no, and once I bring up the image, you'll understand why. What Mr. Cerna is proposing, and what we discussed yesterday, is really keeping the integrity of what used to be the Iredell District and what we call Old Town, keeping the integrity of that in place. Meaning, if your neighborhood is accustomed to 4 units an acre, then it's 4 units an acre based on a block radius. If you are in a part of Old Town that has 7 units per acre, then it's 7 units per acre. And we take an average, and that's an average setback, that's an average density. The one question I have is when we reach the higher numbers and you're the last person in the line with an application, do we say no because we've already reached that density number? So that's still a question to be resolved. And we just met yesterday afternoon, so I don't have any legal input as to how we would make that happen. But absent the Iredell District, absent a certified local government, I think everybody can agree that one of the most important things is to protect the integrity of that old town. And today, I can't say that we can do that. Today, there is no minimum lot size, and so I've given an example of a previously historic home that's been damaged that they are looking to come in and develop, and it could be 8 units on what was one house before, and that's in front of us now. And developers get smart with the definitions that we have in our code. Can you zoom out just a little bit? Zoom out. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So what Mr. Cerna is saying is the lot up here, this is the undivided lot that is 1 acre, but yet the acre at the bottom has been subdivided into 5, 6 additional lots. And so if somebody wants to come develop in this area, let's say this is the block area, then we would take an average number and say you can't divide it any further than that. The character of the district doesn't match, the densities don't match, the city's infrastructure was built a certain way, et cetera, et cetera.
Ms. Carrillo, where is that?
This is 1104 Hill Street.
that's Mina right there.
Okay.
And so as you move along into other areas, there's more denser. There's, further subdivision has happened. If you move to Jefferson and you move to some of the areas back here behind City Hall, there's even denser numbers. In terms of integrity and in terms of protecting the residents from, massive infill development that, number one, we didn't plan for with the infrastructure, and number two, being a resident who has been accustomed to having 1 or 2 houses next to them to now all of a sudden with no minimum lot size, now I've got 4, I've got 6, I've got 8. His recommendation is an absolute awesome one to get us to a point of beginning to protect an area. We are going to have issues with, again, property rights. What can I actually do? And we just presented a plat to you that was ministerial in nature, and that's your job up here. Does it meet the requirements? So taking a step back and looking at it from an area development plan perspective, I know how I can drain this area. I know exactly how I can drain this area. I know exactly how much additional impervious cover I can take in that area. I know how many more toilets I can take in that area based on the line sizes. The only issue I see going down this path is, again, if you're the last person on the line. And you may meet a density requirement, but I don't have any more room in the pipe size for, whatever reason.
So I just kind of thinking about things, right? I'm all for property owner rights, it's your property, but, just as much as you have property owner rights, you have neighborhood rights, and to what you're saying to me, it's are we going to come in and disrupt the demographics of the neighborhood, right? What has traditionally been here? What are people having? Yeah, I don't want to wake up and see 10 houses every day when I was used to seeing something. And then, of course, with our community, we're heavily talking about our wastewater treatment, right, and the infrastructure of that, and the amount of houses just in any location adds to that. And in specific areas, it can be a big, huge impact for adding multiple houses. In my opinion, I think adding one is good. The things that are proposed, if you decide to add more, they're good as well, because again, the thing is the impact of our infrastructure, right? That is huge. And I mean, I don't know how everyone else has lived, not sure how you lived, or if you have a big family, but we all know you can squeeze a lot of people in one little house, right? So that's just something to consider, right, as we're making these decisions. So. Commissioner Moss.
Yes, sir. The way it exists now, also, can't someone buy that piece of property, just using this hypothetically, subdivide the property and take care of all that with us without us doing anything about it, right? We don't have any control over its property rights in that particular
In that
scenario.
particular instance, now, a subdivision of a plat for something that's been used as residential in the preceding 5 years will come through staff, and it will come through Planning Commission.
All right.
I might have said that backward, but a replat's going to come and it's going to have eyes on it. During the replat process is when we look at public improvements necessary, is when we look at, is the adequate water, wastewater, and drainage system there. Adding the parking requirements that we just added keeps that off of the street, because before that, you're right, we could have come in, parcel it out, and if it meets the plat requirement, it's ministerial, and then pushed all of that parking onto the street, which is, again, disruptive to a neighborhood that hadn't been accustomed to that.
What was the city council's actions the other night regarding bedrooms and parking spaces?
Requiring on-site parking, because we had no...
Per bedroom?
Per bedroom.
And that's final?
That is final. They have a second reading.
They have a second reading. Does Pablo Serna's proposal of neighborhood density help solve that issue? So maybe someone's got a 3-bedroom, but only 2 people live in there. They don't need 3 parking spaces, correct?
I think the correction that we made in the code about parking in the first layer solves that issue. So, for example, if your setback is 25 feet, you can obviously fit 3 cars there. The semantics that we had in the code was that, staff took that definition very literal and said no parking in the first layer. And we showed where the text said that. And as I explained to him, development is very difficult. Absent a table and some very black and white, you're not going to have a whole lot of deviation from the staff. They're just little, turtles that are not going to stick their neck out. So I think clearing up the parking in the first layer, clearing up what an improved surface is, and that is, again, with the setbacks wide enough, I think that gets the cars off of the road. We did have a conversation about 25-foot setbacks in City Council. Councilmember Fossler drove around. I did a GIS pin on how many lots would be affected if we if we implemented that. It's minimal, 2 or so lots that would have some sort of impact. Both of those lots are about 50 by 50. They're already remnant lots anyway, but you could build a 20 by 40, tiny home, and so it may serve some sort of purpose. What Mr. Cerna is talking about is in the new addition, for example, those setbacks, Councilmember Plunkett raised this issue, those setbacks are 60. And what he's talking about in terms of averages absolutely makes sense. You drop a pin, and if my 2 neighbors have a 60-foot setback, you should have a 60-foot setback, because that is the integrity of the neighborhood. If you recall, when we visited the ordinance, we came about it the other way around. We said, if you're redeveloping and your neighbor has this setback and your other neighbor has this setback, you should be able to meet that and not have to come into compliance with the B3 code, which push things a lot closer to the public realm. So we learned we've been saying the same thing, just coming at it from opposite ends.
So I have a question. Based on what we're talking about tonight, does this need to be reworded?
Well, so I would encourage, what Mr. Scherner's talking about is probably going to be to you in the February or March timeframe. My recommendation to the commission is to go ahead and approve the reduction to 1, because you're not really approving you're not taking away a property right. There's an additional step that's required to let you get to 2.
I got it.
And then when we do the density averages, that's a different conversation.
So did they change the parking to bedrooms versus just per dwelling unit?
Correct.
At the city council level?
At the city council level.
And you don't recommend that we change that back to 2 per dwelling unit or whatever?
That's a conversation we can have at city council on the 17th of January.
Okay, but you don't see any issues as of right now from
No.
that definition?
No. I think with appropriate setbacks, we're not requiring that you have to have a garage, and that was specific in the wording by Mayor Pro Tem Kirkland. If a covered parking is presented, it would be.
But I think the concern with Pablo is, he could potentially be correct about how people define bedroom, because it changes all the time. Bedroom is a closet, has a window at a certain size, and people might change those or try to get around it to change their parking requirements. Now we're putting people back on the street.
Which is why setbacks are so important. Setbacks are really, really important. And again, if you have a 25-foot setback, that's 3 cars that are already there before you even hit the garage face.
Okay, so you're saying that it doesn't matter if they have 10 bedrooms, if they have the setback, it's going to cover a lot of that parking.
A lot of
for
that,
most part. Okay.
But, again, today, the setback, it's 10 to 25. And so when you go to a 10-foot setback, and again, that was to encourage in the public and private realm conversation. We even had that discussion of what is the public realm. If there isn't a sidewalk in front of that house, are you really walking down Wilson? Or are you turning down the side streets that have sidewalks to avoid playing Frogger in the car, and then having the discussion about what is that intent and how do we orient things? So we do want community interaction. We do want those things, but there's also a balance of what's in the built environment.
So we're going to implement a 25-foot setback on any road frontage in any property, residential or commercial?
That was what was proposed at the council level. They've punted it back to staff. What Mr. Scherner and I are talking about is an average setback.
Yeah,
it may be
okay.
25 because that's your area. It may be 60 because you're a new addition.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on where you're at.
Okay, but we're not defining that today at all?
No,
Okay,
you're not.
just ADU stuff?
Just ADUs, yes, sir. Yes, that's on the next item.
All right, I'm gonna close the public hearing. All right, we need
Got a motion.
what is it?
She's got it. Yeah. Tell her. It's accepted. 3 days. You stole mine.
You got it? Or
Yeah,
you waiting on the
I'm
second?
ready.
Well, shoot it.
This
You got a motion?
She's doing it. No, she
I have a motion.
Okay, well, come on.
Well, come on. All right, I propose that we allow 1 ADU by right and administratively allow 2 if the on-site parking and drainage requirements can be met. Additionally, water and sewer and other infrastructure considerations must also be met.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Yes, ma'am.
That's one piece.
Okay, the second
Sorry,
piece. Okay.
Commissioner
Okay.
Parsons. So really what we're doing is there's multiple things in this item. You're adding it to the table. So you've got to talk about 6. You essentially have to read all of that and say you agree with the changes.
Okay.
Sorry. The legal
I make
beagle
a
over there
motion
is-
that we accept item 3D as written on the page and proposed by staff. How's that?
That works? Okay.
Page 33.
As proposed by staff usually gets us to where we need to get. So
Okay.
I'll accept that.
All right, awesome. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Can you call for roll, please?
Yes, it's going to be Christopher Toth,
Yes.
Ishmael Harris,
Yes.
Keith Alborn,
Yes.
Gary Moss,
Yes.
Jeffrey Estes,
Yes.
Patrice Parsons,
Yes.
Jordan Scott,
Yes.
David Barrow.
Yes, and I would encourage city council to rethink how they define bedrooms and its relationship to the ADU requirements.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes unanimous. All right, now I'm opening up a public hearing, item 3E, to consider and act to amend section SEC 6.5.003 building standards per place type and lot occupation table to reduce lot occupation standards, also known as impervious cover ratios, to reduce flooding risk. This amendment seeks to reduce impervious cover, concrete, asphalt, or other, that water cannot travel through, and require more green space on lots to reduce flood risk throughout the city.
We're back to that table. This time I've cut the table significantly to only cover lot coverage. Right now in the P3, you have a 60% maximum, in the P4, 70, and in the P5, an unheard of 80% lot occupation. I go back to the original intent of us going through this code process. We had a flood. We put a moratorium in place, and we came back with the code that increased impervious cover standards, one canceling out the other. Lot coverage is a quality of life issue. Lots and lots of water comes off of concrete and comes off of roofs. I can't even begin. I mean, if you look at those numbers, annual floods increase by 3.3% on average for each 1 percentage point increase in impervious cover. And so we're trying to take it the other way and reduce it because obviously we live near the Colorado. We live through very flood-prone areas. Atlas 14 has moved our flood lines even closer to more propensity to flood. Absent a master channel system, which we're marching toward, where water can be moved directly through the Colorado and serviced through grasses and other things. Right now, our drainage requirements require pre- and post-development to match, meaning you have to keep all of your water on site, slow it down so that what it was before it was built on is what you're eking out still. What does that do? You're wasting valuable construction land on a detention pond that, quite frankly, when the economy is down, developers aren't necessarily maintaining. And guess who ends up having to maintain it? The city, because the neighbors complain that we're flooding. Somebody's getting flooded by somebody else, and there's all kinds of ugly effects that happen with that. So I'm not going to go through all of the math with you. We can talk about runoff coefficients. I'm a nerd. I like that. What you need to know is the more water can run, the more concrete there is, the faster water is going to run. When I worked for the city of Odessa, the city manager said, will you come look at a development with me? It never used to flood before. It never used to flood before. I don't know what's happening. We haven't done anything different. And as we're driving through there, and Odessa is very flat, and out of the entire city, there's only about 11 miles of underground drainage. The rest of it is surface drainage. They are accustomed to the streets flooding because they know it'll go down within 5-10 minutes. And so you just stop at the light and you wait for the water to go down. Can you travel with me to this subdivision? Don't know what's happening. It's now flooding. Well, as we were driving there, I was watching the ditch, what we call a master channel, and it's got all new concrete pavement on it. And I said, when did you put the concrete in? Oh, in the last 18 months or so. We thought we would reduce the maintenance of the slope mower for parks and recreation and the mowing, and so we thought it'd be easier to put concrete and only leave a small sliver of grass at the bottom. Why do you think you're flooding downstream? You've increased the velocity of the water traveling down that it wasn't prepared to receive. Nothing to do but go back and cut out the concrete because the receiving body isn't going to change. In Corpus Christi, on our plats, we had to name what the receiving body was going to be. And I had to be able to defend engineering mathematically that receiving body could receive it. And if that receiving body had a certain water quality issue, I also had to defend how the grass or whatever best management practice was going to be met. And why? Because Corpus Christi Bay cannot handle any additional pollution. On a hot day, you already can't go swimming. I don't want that for the Colorado. Don't want that. I've lived in a place where that happens. You don't want to do that here. This is the drainage plan that we presented to the city council. It's $120 million, I think, if you do the mathematics. The question was asked to the engineer, if we put all of these things in place, how many houses don't flood? And the answer was zero. We're not really improving a whole lot. We're just trying to not make it any worse. So if I can't improve the receiving basins, if I can't move the river, I can't move Gills Branch, I'm not going to create any dams or any additional, the answer is to lower the impervious cover, lower that number, create more green space so that water has a chance to, number one, slow down, absorb, and number two, be cleaned before it gets to that receiving body. So I told you Councilmember Fossler rode her bike, and I told you I pulled a GIS map. Most of our lot sizes in Old Town, for example, the average lot size is 0.61. They were large lot sizes, about a 7,000 plus square foot lot. Well, more than that because lot is 43. Anyway, the depiction shows a lot of green space, and when we get to the higher density numbers, those things end up going away. It used to be that you could meet impervious cover just with your setbacks, but in our B3 code, those setbacks are reduced. Then you go into planned development districts who can do zero lot line developments and who have, greater areas of coverage. So we're going back to previous regulation, which is 50% in the single family area. I think this is a place where the code had it right. I think this is a place where we need to be. And so I'll just give you an example of what 50% impervious cover looks like. On a 7,000 square foot lot, 50% means you can still cover 3,500 square feet of that lot. A 20-foot setback at the rear, which is even now a minimal yard, 5 on either side and 20 at the front gives you 3,170, less than that 3,500. You add your driveway stall, you add your sidewalks, and you're right at 50%. You're not ever going to build a square house. They articulate in to capture some of that green space. That's still a lot of concrete. In our existing condition with no minimum lot size, I'm just giving you what a 4,500 square lot would be with a 60% impervious cover number, and then you have 2,700 square feet then be covered on a 4,500 square foot lot. That's a lot of concrete. And so add the alleys and those things that our code prefers, and you see where you see how water's moving.
It's an impact to your neighbors. Right. So.
This is Addleton. This is right outside the city limit. This is a 35-foot product. This is Weaver Lane. As you can see, they have some underground drainage. A good proportion of Old Town does not have underground drainage, and we're relying on surface drainage, and we're relying on ribbon curb. So the more I densify an area, the more water's going to move, and if I'm not taking it underground, I'm taking it somewhere. And that somewhere is normally across another person's lot. Bastrop Grove, which is a hybrid. This is an example of a proposed development, 4.25 acres, 44 plus or minus. There is a pond that's going to be required on the site to handle, and that is typical of our development process today. You have to build a pond to handle what your water runoff is going to be. Again, we talk about long-term maintenance. That's going to be borne by who if the developer at some point can't build it, doesn't have an HOA, doesn't have similar to be able to maintain that. That's the site, already blue on the drainage plans. And so what the rules call for is, again, you can't exacerbate it. You have to keep what was there before. And there'll be some raised foundations, et cetera, to hopefully mitigate drainage on this site. This is not new type of density development that's proposed. This is right outside of Rockport, in my neck of the woods. You see what, and this is exactly what Mr. Cerner's talking about. You see where the old development type was there, big lots, lots of oak trees, and you see what got built right next to it. Super dense area. Lots of concrete, lots of road, not a whole lot of green space in that area, and that's water's running off into the bay. And this is a typical product in that home. And I believe Ishmael was in my office when we actually took a Zillow tour of this home, and you can see into your neighbor's home. The setbacks are, minimal.
Yeah, it looks like you can give your neighbor a high five on those. Seriously, like, yeah, it's pretty close.
Patrice, you're familiar with this area. And so, these are some of the arguments. Teachers need housing, we need small, we need et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not opposed to small. I'm not opposed to small. I'm opposed to dense. I'm opposed to big where big wasn't there. And I don't mean big in terms of size-wise. I mean big in terms of number-wise of what wasn't there, which goes back to Mr. Sterna's point is what was the average density there? If it's been 5 units an acre, if it's been 4 units an acre, why would we intensify that? Let's be creative on how we protect what makes Bastrop Bastrop. So you've already done ADU allowance. So you have some options to consider. You can leave the code as is. The additional credits for impervious cover, there's a way to meet that if the project is, barely getting there. We can do pervious pavers, for example. We can do stormwater runoff so that equals calculation so you're not, flooding your neighbor. That's also good for irrigation reuse if you capture that water off of the roof and be able to use it to re-irrigate or water or whatever it is you're doing. So.
Thank you. We have one citizen comment. Pablo Serna wishes to speak on this agenda item.
Thank you.
Go ahead and tell us who you are.
Pablo Serna, 1104 Hill Street. I agree that we need to adjust our impervious cover limits. I want you to consider, I think she brought up water retention, water harvesting. If that's encouraged and that's shown to be something that could be done, and you have a small lot, that would be the other thing I wanted to talk about in a minute is a small lot versus a large lot. But if water harvesting, encouraging that kind of water conservation could yield a higher percentage. Also consider wood decks at 50%. Wood decks can drain at least part of the way. Also, going back to the minimum lot size, small lot versus a large lot. Larger lots can absorb more water on them. A smaller lot would need a higher percentage for rural development. So again, if you establish those numbers, I think that's going to take a little bit of study and a little bit of work. These are standards that are happening already around us in other municipalities. So look at a small lot, a large lot, you may want to adjust some percentages for the difference. But if we're going just broad base, I agree we need to reduce. But I think we're looking at, we're taking a big brush on this. So moving forward, I would recommend that once you establish minimum lot sizes and you look at using density per acre as a limit, that you should revisit the impervious cover limits.
Thank you. All right. If we don't have any other citizen comments and no further discussion, I'm going to close the public hearing. All right. Would someone go ahead?
So I think it's important to me because I'm totally on board with reducing the lot coverage. I did like how you included, because I was going to ask about that, the incentives to increase that impervious cover if they were going to do some sort of rainwater collection or recycling. I know as a city, we're asking for a lot of green space for these developers, and with that green space, I mean, it's great, but it also takes a lot more water, which if we're referring back to our conversation with the impact fees, I mean, would that also work in tandem with reducing impact fees or offering a credit if they're reducing their water use? Because irrigation is bigger, I would say, than for water use than it is just personal.
It has a direct correlation. It has a direct correlation because if you're doing rainwater capture and if you go into the Wimberley area of the state, and you'll see the big metal water harvesting tanks that are part of businesses. They're capturing almost everything off of the runoff, off of the roof. It goes through a filtration sediment system in the tank, and they use that to irrigate the lot. That means you have one less irrigation line. That means you have less water needing to come through the meter itself, which in turn equals a smaller meter. So yes, it has a direct correlation on how much you'd end up having to pay.
So I know I really like that idea, but my only concern with giving incentives with rainwater collection is how is it enforceable if we grant all of these incentives and then 2 years down the road they say we don't need this anymore and they remove everything and they just stop collecting water and they go back to how they're operating normally. Is there any way
You
to...
mean, do you mean a financial incentive or do you mean a development incentive?
Well, I'm thinking, because if I'm a developer and I'm looking at how much retail space I want to squeeze on a lot, right? That's where I'm going to start looking at lot coverage, and that's really in parking and all that stuff. Maybe that incentivizes me to add a rainwater collection system so I can get those numbers up, because 5% on a 40-acre development, that's a big deal. That's could be a few $1 million in revenue that they're getting from that. However, what could we do to hold that developer accountable to make sure that those systems stay functional in, say, 5-10 years?
So one, an irrigation system requires a backflow device. And backflow devices have to be tested annually. So that's number one. I got to know that you aren't going to contaminate my other system based on your backflow device. So that's a way to capture it, number one. Number two is really encouraging mixed parking standards, meaning if I have a retail development and that store closes at 8, but then I have an entertainment district over here and they stay open till midnight, allowing some credit for shared parking so that I'm not over parking an area, which then creates additional runoff.
Okay, cool. So we do have ways to enforce if we do allow credits, whether it be for impact fees and or additional lot coverage for rainwater collection on the commercial level. But how about for the residential level? Because also going back to the whole ADU thing, let's say I wanted to add an additional dwelling unit, but I need an extra 5%. If I put rainwater collection in, is that something that
could be used to offset? And to Mr. Cerna's point about decks, you have to allow for the expansion joint, and so you normally put a nail in between the boards that allows water to go through, unless it's a covered deck. Then that doesn't receive any credit. If it's an open deck, an open system where water's going to go through, then yes, absolutely, that'll receive a credit. But from a residential standpoint, I can do a lot of things. I can, for example, not put a solid concrete drive all the way to the front. I could break it up with grass. I could do some rainwater capture. I could do impervious pavers on the back patio deck instead of having, a solid concrete surface. So within the same sort of, the whole goal is that water gets to travel down and gets to have some sort of treatment method on site as opposed to just running straight off.
Okay, so as 3E reads, we're only addressing changing the table and reducing that.
Correct.
Is that verbiage that's in the slide something that we could use to also add to or make I would say in my motion, make an amendment to add?
You would make an amendment to add.
Okay, to add, and that we would grant incentives for, or credits.
I would say credit.
Okay.
And I'm going to be real careful, because if bond council's listening, I don't want to get in trouble. We never credit impact fees in terms of I'm going to give you a discount, because we have debt that we're paying that's based on a certain revenue.
Yeah, I'm not worried about impact fees as much as I am about lot coverage, because I know in the bigger developments, lot coverage is important, and then on the smaller level, if someone wants that second dwelling unit, or they want to build a little bit bigger of a house, if they offer the rainwater collection as well. Because me personally, I do want to encourage rainwater collection, because I know Texas water use is a big deal, and then two, like I said, with the development, the irrigation it probably consumes a majority of commercial water, I would assume.
Yes, it does. The other issue is from the residential standpoint, we do winter averaging. And so if you're collecting in this season, for example, and you're not turning on your normal sprinkler, your normal way to water, and you're using the water that you've harvested, that's not water that's going through the meter. So that's not figured into your bill later on to end up with a higher bill. So there's a wide variety of mechanisms to allow for that. But yes, you would need to amend your motion to give credit to
Water conservation.
Yes, water conservation efforts.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Should we be specific to how much credit we are going to allow I guess like you said, per 1,000 gallon or however you said? Do we need to be
No,
specific
because that's going to be a
numbers?
function of engineering. For example,
Okay.
we may say we would like you to have a rainwater harvesting tank. Well, guess what? That rainwater harvesting tank takes up some space on the lot. So in the beginning, we go up impervious cover number because they just added another structure.
Yeah.
On the back end, okay, what buildings are receiving and how can I do that? And then there are multiple mechanisms. If you've not gone to Sunset Valley, please go there. The buildings, the campus, the City Hall campuses, all of that rainwater gets collected. It gets sent through a pond that has multiple features. That pond is a public amenity. It's, wildlife and things are in there. So there's ways to do it. There's ways to credit it. One is going to offset the other.
Can I make
All
a
right,
suggestion, Scott? This probably needs to be handled as a separate issue.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Because it is I've got a lot of experience in this area. I had a 12,500 gallon rainwater collection system in Austin.
Yeah.
And there's
We gotta have specific-
real issues to deal with. It's not as simple.
But it's
It's a good idea
specifics
to
on the
tie to this,
credits.
But
I
you
think.
almost have to develop that as entity in itself and then let it go out from there.
Yeah, I guess
You could
that
issue that as
try
a
to tie
directive
it
to
to-
staff to bring it back.
My train of thought is if we're going to take away, let's also give people options to get that back.
But
Without this being delayed for months or years and it never gets changed and gets forgotten about, you know what I mean?
So
Doesn't
what
work
you can do
kind of
is approve this, but direct staff to come back with that incentive or credit list by the January meeting.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure that the ball is rolling on it and it doesn't get backlogged and we forget about it because we have a million other things to do. That's my whole deal.
All right, Commissioner Welsh, you got anything else?
That's it.
Okay. You good? All right. So since you've done it all, give it to us.
So I would like to make a motion to approve the amendment to section 6.5.003 building standards per place type A to reduce law occupation standards, also known as impervious cover ratios, to reduce flooding risk, to match the chart that was provided to us.
We have a motion and a second. Can you please call for roll?
Christopher Toth,
Yes.
Ishmael Harris,
Yes.
Keith Alborn,
Yes.
Gary Moss,
Yes.
Jeffrey Estes,
Yes.
Patrice Parsons,
Yes.
Jordan Scott,
Yes.
and David Barrow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I make a second motion to direct staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I would like to make another motion to direct staff to do some due diligence and research on adding credits towards lot coverage for rainwater collection.
All right, we got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Wait,
Wait.
do we have discussion after that?
Oh, go ahead.
After the second, can we have discussion?
Yes.
Okay. I think it needs to be broader, not just rain collection.
Water conservation.
The whole gamut. But, I mean, for someone who built a house and then they put gutters in and then they put the rainwater and then they put a deck in and then they do what you said with the driveway. They do half grass, if they do things, you need a list of this is what you can do to your house that will give you credits and this is what your credits will be.
I like that.
So water, okay.
Well, I think this is better off as an agenda item for.
That's what he's,
Right.
that's what he's,
That's what he's saying, because of how in-depth it can be. We need to make that an agenda item.
he's making it as a motion to give direction to make sure it comes back and we don't forget about it.
Can I amend my motion to include water conservation as a whole?
Yes. Okay. He needs to shoot it off. He needs to say it again.
No, that's good, but I need another second to that
Okay.
amended motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you call for roll, please?
Christopher Toth,
Yes.
Ishmael Harris,
Yes.
Keith Alborn,
Yes.
Gary Moss.
Yep.
Jeffrey Estes,
Yes.
Patrice Parsons,
Yes.
Jordan Scott,
Yes.
and David Barrow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you. Are we still going to go forth with?
Not trees, we're going to move to 4A.
Okay. All right, so we are we're going to table item 3F because Kennedy, she was going to be presenting it. She had to leave last minute due to her falling sick. Mr. Thompson, if you can please return to the next meeting so we can get this. I mean, I'm sorry, right? Like
Yes, additionally, yes, we're
right?
tabling it to a
Because
date
we
certain.
want to be able to have everything. We appreciate you being here, your input. You know, sometimes people can't control what happens to them towards the end of the day. So we would like to be respectful of her time and work in this and make sure we get everything out there correctly.
Mr. Thompson also did substantial work on the ordinance itself, and he has a handout. We will make sure all of the commission has that handout so that you have it before.
That is what we just received?
No, this is Viviana's work.
Oh, yes, something different.
So we'll make sure that you have it in your email, and you can have something of substance to discuss at the next meeting.
And can I get a motion to table that item 3F?
Yes.
To
Can we get?
January?
Can I get a motion to table that item number 3F? I make a motion to table
Second.
3F.
We have a motion and a second. Please call for roll.
Second. Oh,
No.
third it.
All right. Are we ready?
Okay. Yes. Christopher
All right.
Toth,
Yes.
Ishmael Harris.
Yes.
Keith Alborn,
Yes.
Gary Moss.
Yep.
Jeffrey Estes.
Yes.
Patrice Parsons,
Yes.
Jordan Scott,
Yes.
David Barrow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to agenda item 4A, update on the draft community enrichment fund for the public open space ordinance. Discuss the intent of the ordinance as it relates to the creation of parks and open spaces, assessing a fee in lieu of dedication, and the creation of park development fund. Request input and direction from commission on the content of the ordinance. Ms. Viviana.
Hello, good evening, Commission. So I went ahead and handed you an updated ordinance just for your edification. The changes are highlighted. This is very much a work in progress. After we get recommendations from you tonight, the intent of staff is to send it to legal for review, and then after that proceed with hopeful adoption at council. Essentially, what we're seeking to do is adopt a new ordinance. It would be Chapter 17 of the Code of Ordinances, and it would be a public space and community enrichment fund. Essentially, this will seek to replace the B3 code mechanism that does the dedication of parkland, which in the B3 code is currently known as civic space. The ordinance itself is comprised of three different aspects. There's the aspect of the park development fund, there's the aspect of parkland dedication, and then, of course, the aspect of the park enrichment fee. Those are three separate mechanisms. Dedication of parkland honestly usually precedes the park development fund, but the fund is established in the ordinance early on. And so essentially the way it works, when a development comes in, we look at the overall development and generally we ask for dedication of parkland. Not every development can do that, and that's fine. And so we want to establish a mechanism for receiving a fee in lieu of dedication. In tandem with that, what we're also recommending is a park enrichment fee. A park enrichment fee will be an additional fee that's separate from the fee in lieu of dedication if they decide to not dedicate, or the dedication of parkland. I'm excited about this ordinance because I do want to talk a little bit about the B3 code and how it functions, and then I'll break down the three different pieces. But this won't take long, I promise. So essentially, the current B3 code, parkland is defined as civic space. Civic space has several forms that it can take. And while that's nice, sometimes the notion behind civic space is that it's dedicated to the city in perpetuity for maintenance. Not all of these forms are forms that we want to maintain in perpetuity or have the responsibility thereof. If a development wants to come in and wants to do some of these spaces, we encourage that and we would recommend that they do it, but we want them to maintain some of these more unique forms, such as a plaza or a square or things like that. We're more in line with maintaining the parks that we currently have or a true park that they're dedicating. And so essentially in the B3 code, like I said, these are the different forms that are allowed. And then the way that parkland is actually allocated in the B3 code is pretty nuanced. So essentially the way the B3 code broke it out is you have what's called a pedestrian shed. A pedestrian shed is a 1/4 mile radius, and so the map right there shows kind of, right there, This is the pedestrian shed. So essentially the idea behind what it's also known for short, a ped shed. And the notion behind the ped shed is that with every quarter-mile buffer, if you will, you would have what's called a complete community. And in that complete community, you have a mix of all of the uses that are found within the B3 code. And out of the mix of all of those uses, 10% of that should be civic space. Let me tell you, when a developer comes in and you're talking them through civic space and parkland dedication requirements, that in and of itself, because it's so nuanced, it's not a fun conversation. Because it's generally a developer, they have an allocated area that they've identified for parkland, but it's probably in just one segment of the development. Rarely does a developer ever have quarter-mile ped sheds throughout their entire development where they've allocated 10% of civic space. So this ordinance that we're seeking to adopt honestly really simplifies the process. It is very nice. So essentially, what we are proposing to do instead is for single family, it's 1 acre for every 100 proposed dwelling units. For multifamily, 1 acre for every 200 proposed dwelling units, and it doesn't apply to commercial. The caveat that we are recommending is if it's a subdivision that has 50 lots or less, that they just go straight to dedication of fee in lieu, because the likelihood of that development being able to accommodate parkland dedication is probably highly unlikely, and we're okay with that. So fee in lieu would suffice. This does not necessarily apply to commercial developments, but if you want it to, it can. Essentially, now I will say this, while parkland dedication might not apply to commercial developments, it's always a good idea, and what we are looking at as staff is beefing up our landscape ordinance, because in my opinion, a commercial development, if we had stronger landscape standards, while they might not be dedicating parkland for the city to maintain, they would have a measure of green space, foliage, trees like that. With the way that the B3 code is currently designed, it puts no burden of landscape on the developer. It puts it all in the public realm. So we're trying to augment that, because that's generally not best practices. Next would be the Parkland Development Fund. And this is how we currently do have a fee adopted, right? So the fee's already in place in the fee schedule in the Appendix A. This is just kind of quantifying the metric. Now I do have four proposed quadrants. These are not set in stone, okay? But it's just essentially the way that I understand the legislation is written. Whenever you have a fee in lieu, you're supposed to, or you collect a fee in lieu. Technically, you're supposed to kind of reinvest it in that general area. So what setting up the quadrants does is it kind of gives the developer and the community an expectation of where those dollars are going to go for the dedication of fee in lieu. Now that's separate from the park enrichment fee. So these are just kind of generally the four quadrants that we've proposed. They're bifurcated essentially by 71 and the Colorado River. These would further, later on down the line, ideally tie into the area development plans that Ms. Sylvia's talked about, and we just kind of start to add layers so that we really have precision development really is the goal, right? The other kind of caveat to this is we would be required to keep an account of all the funds, so we're not just receiving monies and not being accountable. And then essentially, if we don't expend them within 7 years, the owners are entitled to a refund. So that kind of gives the developer some comfortability that we're asking for monies for real improvements, not just to, take it into our coffers and not do something with it. And then finally, the park enrichment fee. Now, this fee is different. We've never done a fee like this in the city of Bastrop, but other communities actually already have this fee in place and actually have a much more expensive fee. I did some research, and for instance, the city of Buda, they have a parkland improvement fee, which is just a different way of saying the same thing, and it's $1,000 per residential unit. I was like, oh wow, that's quite a bit. We're only proposing $250 per dwelling unit. In the city of Pflugerville, they have one too, and it's a range of $496 to $745 per dwelling unit. So it's not an uncommon practice. It wouldn't be something that isn't currently implemented and or allowed. The difference with this particular fund would be that it can be allocated at large. So it would be very beneficial, honestly, for the maintenance of our pre-existing parks. Think Ferry Park, think Fisherman's Park, or any of the other parks that we currently have in play. And so it's not tied to the development quadrants because it's not a fee in lieu of dedication, so it's monies that are used to enhance the parks that we have. And outside of that, that's kind of a synopsis of what we're looking at and proposing. Essentially, the next steps are going to be going through the code to see what parts of the code we would be essentially repealing, getting legal's opinion and weighing in on that. And then, of course, I want to get y'all's recommendations to see if you like the direction we're headed. And then we'll also be meeting with the Parks Board to talk about it too. So, thoughts? Questions?
So tonight, we voted for to raise the impact fee significantly. Is this also, in addition now, another fee for new developers? It's another fee. Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
What are you guys' proposals on who gets to make the decision on how the funds are spent?
So that would probably be dictated by the Parks Board? Okay.
I'm sorry, Parks Board?
Yes.
Great. Yeah.
Recommendation by the Parks Board with final approval by City Council.
Great. May I make a recommendation that they consider both new parks and maintenance of existing parks, not just concentrate on one or the other type of thing, like it needs to be both.
So,
For sure.
that goes back to the quadrant component that she had, where we must spend the park development fund in these areas. And so from a parks master plan component, we want to talk about, okay, where does the park go in this particular area? And that goes to new parks. Going further into new developments, we have a development that's coming up that you'll see in January called Ironwood, which is south on 304. What we were able to do with that development is that developer is putting in a park. It's a municipal utility district in city. That developer will program and maintain that park. So it's not on us. It's part of the development process. And there's some, bumpers on that. But also making sure that the park is front facing. It's not buried so deep in a subdivision that it doesn't feel like a public park, which is right now, when you look at the civic space, they can bury it anywhere in the development. And, I had a lot of people tell me, I didn't even know Riverside Grove was a public park. I thought it belonged to the neighborhood. And the parks should have a front face so that everybody feels welcome in the park.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Just say outstanding presentation, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And I think this is a great idea.
All right.
Don't mind him.
Okay. All right. Anyone got a motion in them?
I believe this is just.
We're just not a motion, right? It's just a discussion, right? Sorry. I'm getting a little too excited.
This is a question for the board. How do we feel about adding more costs to the developers? Are we okay with the 250? Because this is going to impact commercial, residential.
Not commercial.
Oh, this is residential only.
Residential. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then I want to go back to the thought process between when it's a smaller subdivision, for example, less than 50 lots. And we have one in process right now that is going through, that is an old, super old platted lot. Those folks are going to use the parks. We want them to use the parks. We want them to engage in the public space. So a fee in lieu of is just, it's, standard. We can put that into one of the quadrants. We can put it into one of the quadrants and begin to create wonderful park space. The park fee itself is, we do have a lot of programming at Fisherman's, at Fireman's, at all of the other parks that will be benefited by the fee.
And it doesn't matter, this doesn't change regardless of what type of green space or anything they provide, correct? This is no matter what you're paying this.
Correct.
Commissioner Parsons.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it is the developer's responsibility to create green space in this city and make it a more livable city. So I think if they want to come here, they need to make it a nice place.
Thank you.
Yeah. The only reason why I'm questioning it is because, like he said, that we are raising fees and additional fees and stuff, and I hear a lot on this board, cost of living, and these are all things that we have to think about that drive up cost of living, is putting fees on developers to where they have to feel like I have to raise my cost or my prices for my rent to recuperate.
Commissioner Estes, go ahead.
Is it like if someone was to build a custom home within the city limits, would they have to pay the impact fee and this fee to get their water meter and all that? So this would include someone who said has lived here for a while and suddenly they decide they want to build a custom home. Now they're going to have these extra fees.
So a custom home on an empty lot?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. The impact fee would apply no matter if it was 5,000 or the proposed 8,000. Those fees apply regardless.
Yep.
The fee in lieu of is probably going to be minimal, if any, because it's only one lot.
Okay.
It's, $40. And then, I'm sorry, $400. And then the park enrichment fee is really the utilization. And I'm going to go back to the example. We keep talking about development should pay for itself. It doesn't. But we recoup it on the long term through ad valorem and through property tax value that they put on the ground. For this particular municipal utility that's at 304 that is going up, we're not going to maintain a lot of it. But I still know that police and fire and ESDs and all of the public safety, we still show up anyway. The roads need maintenance, we still show up anyway. So we were able to negotiate a portion of that ad valorem back to the city.
Good.
Because it must help sustain this beautiful city that we call Bastrop. If we're all, our parks right now they're in a little bit tired condition. We have a massive population growth. I want to be able to maintain them and make sure that they are jewels. Buda has beautiful splash pads, I'm just going to say, and that's a result of some of this.
And this is also ETJ. Anybody in the ETJ would be included in all these fees that are using our sewer and our water? Is that right?
Within agreements.
But not for building permits, because we don't issue building permits outside the ETJ, so there
No,
wouldn't.
in the ETJ.
I'm sorry, like outside the city limits, no, we don't issue building permits outside the city limits, so
Okay.
we would not be aware of a permit being issued to
I
us.
just know that, like we're doing the sewer that goes all the way out to Tesla, not Tesla, you know what I mean? X and all that's coming back in. If someone wanted to build in this area where they're going to tie into our sewer and all that, does any of these fees that we've talked about tonight?
Impact fees, yes.
So yes, impact fees are going to apply through our agreement with Corex. Not just impact fees, but we have an agreement with Corex on recapture of other fees.
I just feel like we have a responsibility to make that clear to our citizens.
Yes, so let me be super crystal clear. The partnership with Corex is because there are a lot of other users that are going to be going into the plant, and you maintain an economy of scale. You don't want a bunch of treatment plants along the Colorado either. So it's really incumbent upon us to work together to get a good, efficient plant that only has one outfall or only one spillway. That's the first thing. The second thing is we can't pay for it by ourselves. You saw the numbers. And so that's why that partnership is so super critical. But for our partnership with Aqua and our partnership with Corex, there are fees that have to be paid that help us also maintain the cost to keep the downward pressure on the rates.
Commissioner Moss?
Does this money that would be raised, would that have anything to do with the supposed sports facility?
No.
None?
No, this is, when you think park enrichment fee, think being able to cover the cost of the splash pad or having to re-engineer the splash pad at Fisherman's Park that we hopefully can get a recirculating water feature. So that's one of the highest water users in town, right? And so the cost was like $100,000 to just do the redesign and re-engineering. So these fees are going to be to enhance just the quality of life that everyone gets to experience and everyone gets to basically be a part of by being a part of this community. A lot of different parks, too, in larger municipalities or cities can charge entrance fees for just some of the amenities within the park. We don't do that. Everything that we have in our parks is free to the citizens. So this is our one time to get a fee in order to recoup some costs so that we can make it affordable and as awesome as possible. And I don't know about you guys, I've lived here my whole life and I love our parks. And I love the idea of providing kind of lifeblood to our parks to see them thrive and grow and flourish. So,
And if I may add to that from over here.
No, from over there.
Obviously, the intent is to kind of provide somewhat of an alternative relief for what would already be provided in the open space for these certain developments. And I would encourage staff to look at possibly adding a way in which you can, kind of combine the two, whether that's a park and open space dedication along with fee in lieu, if it makes sense for the development. And coming from or dealing with a city such as Buda that does that, I've seen it work, and it actually provides that relief sought sometimes for the developer if they're able to combine the two.
okay, like do a hybrid. So there's a portion of dedication and a portion of fee in lieu to accommodate their development. That makes sense.
All right. Thank you, Reza. No more discussion? All right. Thank you, Ms. Viviana.
Thank you.
All right. Item 4B, future development related items. He's coming.
I'm tapping out.
So if it's okay, I'm going to include, if it's okay with the commission, I'm going to include 4B and 4D, Development Service Monthly Report.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So they don't have an official report. I usually bring up on number statistics, but just kind of getting a general overview of what you're interested in. I guess y'all see all the hotels going up around town. We have the Val Verde subdivision off of 969, which is D.R. Hart, and they're doing substantial houses. In front of Lowe's, you'll see the strip center going up, the new building there. That's going to be a strip center. Specifically, a Chipotle's already is part of that process. And tonight you saw is partnership with developers. We're running all these projects concurrent, so part of proving that plat tonight, where I'm already working on drainage site, so they've already applied for building permit based on resolving all this stuff. So instead of taking 6 months from plat to permit, you're going to see stuff coming up pretty quick after the plat. So, and then one else kind of still engineering. I've seen Agnes Road going in, so that project's going real good. Andres, Agnes Road's going good, timeline on that. So that's one of our big public work projects. You got any other public works ones?
Yeah, we have Agnes Street going. Agnes, as you can see, already broke ground right there in front of the new hotels along 304 there. They started on that side, and they're going towards Walmart. You'll see that go. They have a year, October of 25 to complete. They'll probably be moving faster than that. They're moving pretty quick right now. We're working on some stuff with Blakey, trying to get Blakey extended. We're working on, we call it Vista Fuente. That's kind of a FM20 when you're looking at FM20 to the north, like towards Valverde. There's like a clearing there. We're going to try to expand that right away and push that through to Valverde, which will then tie into 969. We're looking at that. Some other projects. Yeah, we have working on completion of the FM 969 sewer line that goes from Valverde down to the wastewater plant. We're working on the 36-inch to get to Corex that you mentioned earlier. Lots of development projects going on. We have a ton of stuff.
So in other words, we can email y'all if we want.
Absolutely.
Okay. That'll save you a little trouble trying to remember it all.
Yeah,
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the Sprouts and the Dick's Sporting Goods across from Lowe's, when is that breaking ground?
He should be should be moving here pretty quick. Do you have something new?
I'm out.
Skirt. Uh-oh, sorry, I stirred up trouble.
No. You're fine. We're working through a development agreement right now between the EDC and the city. There's some pretty significant text dot improvements that are required on that segment of 71 to stop the Chick-fil-A effect.
Yeah, you should see some restriping as a part of that comes. TxDOT's already got that in their plans. They're waiting for, I think, about March timeline to start the restripe underneath that intersection to alleviate Burleson. But there's also those improvements that she's speaking about some right turn lanes and some widening of Burleson crossing right there, the Ed Burleson, from Blakey to Ed Burleson. But TxDOT is going to widen out underneath the bridge and restripe it so that you can do double turn lanes so we can relieve some of the traffic at Lowe's. So that is coming. We're just got to wait for the weather.
All right, awesome.
What other questions? There's a lot going on. Lots.
Did you just say one other question?
No, I said any other questions. There's a lot going
I was
on.
like, hey, wait a minute.
It's all here.
You're not giving a fire report here. We can ask more.
I have a question.
Sure.
What's happening with Childers and Hassler and 71? Those
Like right-
intersections. Are anything going to be happening with those intersections anytime soon?
We did a study, and I think we're going to try to look at those one more time and see what we can bring forward. Are you talking about like just the impact in general, the traffic? Yeah. Here lately, though, I think TxDOT's doing some striping and improvements at both of those. So right now, like today, I saw traffic was backed up by Sonic and all that. That's TxDOT. That's not us. There was a study that was done. We're going to try to see revive that study, update it, and see what we can do to improve those intersections.
I don't suppose you can shut down McDonald's.
I cannot shut down. No, city manager has
easy.
Yes,
You might
I
get
cannot.
yourself in trouble.
I didn't say that.
No, I cannot.
I take
but
that back.
city manager has had conversations with McDonald's and some other of the businesses there to see if we can work through.
Rerouting them.
Well, some right of way or changing the layout of the intersections there. So.
Sorry. I'm trying to keep up with it all. McDonald's is going through so McDonald's is transitioning out of their license period with McDonald's where they can only do certain things. In the next 2 years, they told us they're going to go through a significant remodel, which will give us an opportunity to rework that intersection.
Let me ask you about Blakely. Is it because of the apartment complex being pushed out? Is that going to slow that down or stop it? Or?
No, the right-of-way acquisition, what has taken Blakey a little bit is we have a grant for Blakey, and that requires some environmental processes that take an awful long time, not to mention the additional right-of-way that's needed to the north of Blakey. And so we just got 100% designs for Blakey. Now I know exactly how much right-of-way I need, which sends me back to negotiations with the landowner. The apartment complex, as close as it is to Blakey, the headache that gives me later on is those trees are going to come up for water and that road won't be sustainable. So we're going to have to relook at where those trees are located and perhaps locate them maybe to the north. But Blakey is intended to have a wide sidewalk, as is Valverde, that would connect, and we end up taking it all the way to Old Austin Highway so that the kids have a safe path to school.
Gotcha. Cool. Thanks.
Anyone else? Anything? Any more questions? All right. Thank you. All right. On to item 4C, individual requests from planning and zoning commissioners that particular items be listed on future agendas. No group discussion allowed. Y'all have anything?
An update on the bridge going across the river?
Okay.
I can give you that now. Can you back up one? No.
It's got to be a future. You got to talk about it next time.
Go ahead.
So I would also like to add, if we can get back to signs, more so, we don't have to cover everything on signs, but if we can look at Main Street, since we're doing the whole liaison thing, that's Main Street, they're looking at doing some things down there with signage. So they would really like for us to look at things and maybe get something back to them. Michaela's giving me some stuff to review, but if we can kind of look at that for next time.
Sure, we can cover that in one meeting.
That's why I said just Main Street. I didn't say the broad spectrum of signs, just that one small area, and maybe branch out from there. We like to get long-winded up here sometimes, right? All right.
And just to reiterate an earlier motion that was made, obviously we'll be bringing back incentive or the credits related to water conservation at a future meeting.
Yes. Yeah. All right, we don't have anything else?
Adjournment.
All right,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Wait, hold on, whoa. We got one more. Commissioner Alborn.
Yeah, is there any considerations in adding splash parks to other parks? You know, like Bob Bryant and, and being I've got grandkids in the area, they're always, where can we go?
Okay, we can talk about that next time.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Add splash parks?
Future. Yeah.
We'll add splash parks.
All right, we got anything else? All right, quick draw.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion.
I second.
And a second. Thank you guys. Thank y'all, Bastrop. Have a great night. We'll see y'all. Oh, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah, happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. Thank y'all.